Ryan, what's on your radar?
Now that the bipartisan infrastructure bill is headed for a final vote sometime tomorrow in the Senate, the next phase of the high-stakes game of congressional chicken kicks off. For those who aren't caught up, Democrats are trying to pass two bills at once, which they've been calling a two-track strategy. One of them is this bipartisan deal, which adds about $550 billion in new spending. That one can be filibustered, so it needs 60 votes. The other is going through a process called budget reconciliation, which means it only needs 50 votes, which means as long as the entire Democratic caucus votes for it, it can pass. That one currently includes $3.5 trillion in additional new spending, and it focuses on what people are calling soft infrastructure: universal pre-K, 2 years of free community college, an extension of the child tax credit into 2025, lots of climate money, and so on. That legislation would be genuinely transformational. And therefore, corporate Democrats in the House are just fine seeing the bigger package whittled down or killed altogether. So they're calling on Speaker Nancy Pelosi to pass the bipartisan bill as quickly as possible so they can concentrate their firepower on the big package they're not fans of. Yet here's their problem. Right now, they need progressive Democrats to support the bipartisan bill because while it might be bipartisan in the Senate, the House is a different beast. Or, more accurately, it's filled with different kinds of beasts. House Republicans are largely on the early side of their careers, and they have no interest in rubber stamping anything that Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, and Nancy Pelosi teamed up on, even if it got the votes of people like Senator Rob Portman, who, not coincidentally, is retiring. So Democrats can't count on many Republican votes in the House, meaning a small number of Democrats can hold up the bill by promising to vote no, giving them the kind of leverage we talked about on this program back in June when all this kicked off. AOC has been rounding up allies to oppose any bill before the House is comfortable that the other has been released. And she has said publicly the number of committed no votes she has is in the double digits. The last time that people were pushing the squad to hold up legislation, the $1.9 billion relief bill, they were in the opposite situation. The bill included billions of dollars for vaccine distribution while people were dying by the thousands. And it also included $1,400 checks, including for child and adult dependents. That meant a family of four was looking at getting a $5,600 check, money they desperately needed. If they'd have tried to refight their loss on the minimum wage under those conditions, it's not hard to imagine how well they'd have done in the public eye. What makes AOC's position this time different is that there's really very little to lose in holding this bill up. Whenever it hits the floor, Democrats will vote for it, including all the corporate Democrats, so that's not a concern. And there's nothing in it that has to go out absolutely immediately or people will suffer immediate harm. Sooner is better than later, but we've been waiting this long, so a few more weeks won't kill anybody. The reconciliation bill is going to take some time. It'll take until the end of this week to move it through the first phase, a goofy process called a vote-a-rama. And then the details of the bill need to be hashed out by the various committees and reconciled by Bernie Sanders' budget committee. With August recess, we're looking at September before it passes. But if the House can recess with the eviction moratorium lapsed, there's no need to rush back to do the bidding of the corporate Democrats trying to rush this process. If they caved on that, the chance they'd instantly be backstabbed by conservative Democrats in the House and Senate is extremely high. It's not worth the risk. There's precious little upside and nothing but downside. What concessions, after all, are these conservative Democrats offering to move the bipartisan bill faster? None at all. And progressives have one more ace up their sleeve. It turns out nobody cares about any of this. Congress is on the verge of passing $4 trillion in new spending and cementing a child tax credit that will transform millions of people's lives. And it barely gets a mention on cable news or Twitter, which are the two places politicians turn to dive into what the public is focusing on at the moment. So if the public isn't even paying attention, the public can't pressure progressives to cave. They can't pressure them to sacrifice their leverage, and they can't pressure them to just wave this bill through. Just look at the coverage of this $550 billion bipartisan package. The only thing people seem to care about is the piece that regulates crypto. But let me do a quick digression about that crypto piece. So for young people on both the left and the right, crypto is considered to be an unquestionably good thing, a populist equalizer that is a boon to individual freedom. I don't see it that way. People say that crypto is a good thing because its supply is predictable and therefore it's more stable than other currencies. But anybody who's watched it knows that's absurd. Crypto is anything but stable. Its other quality is that it allows people to evade financial and other regulations, and the mining of it is incredibly energy intensive, and that's before it has scaled up broadly. Crypto isn't dumb, if you ask me, it's actively bad. Feel free to prove me wrong in the comments section, but I just don't see it. But still, it's fascinating that all of this spending is getting pushed through, and the thing the public and media care about seems to be that crypto piece. Democrats should internalize that they're living in a new reality. For 40 years, they lived in fear of being called tax and spend liberals. Now that they're actually finally doing some real spending, the country is collectively shrugging. So for progressives in the House, this is no time to let up. And so, Alyssa, I'm curious if you think my vote count is right in the House of Representatives. If you had to guess now, how many House Republicans do you think Pelosi would be able to get over her way? Because McCarthy has no interest in kind of helping Pelosi shepherd this through.
Right. So that's the million-dollar question. Well, I appreciate your analysis. I actually think that Republicans could pull about 20 votes, maybe 24 votes. And my prediction is this. Nancy Pelosi is laser focused on the midterm. She's laser focused on keeping her speakership. And that is going to be done by protecting moderates and by having a victory to point to on the campaign trail, which is an infrastructure package. I think that she's going to take her time on it. She's not going to immediately take it up on the House floor. She may throw some superficial wins to the AOC wing of the party, but I think this thing's ultimately going to pass with some bipartisan support. She knows she can't lose the support of the Gang of 10 in the Senate, or this thing's not going anywhere. Right. So that's my best guess. I think you're actually right. I think Pelosi would love to push this through with 20 to 24 votes. And so then the second million-dollar question is can AOC round up more than that? So she has now said 10, or she has now said double digits. So, you can guess that the squad is 6 people, and then you can start guessing who else there might be. Can she get to 20 or 24 that says no? And she's not saying that Democrats aren't saying that they don't ever want to pass it. They just want to wait until they're certain that this bipartisan package is coming. So do you think there's a chance that progressive Democrats that AOC has organized could get higher than 24? I think it's possible, but unlikely. I think it's strategically wrong of Pelosi to not just move this forward now with Republican support, but I understand that she's not trying to tick off the entire progressive wing of her caucus. The longer she lets AOC and co. try to garner support for their side of things, I think it's actually they're going to be able to tick up their numbers, and you could have Republican support wane. That said, I've been on the AOC side of this as the former Freedom Caucus spokesperson. We often, challenged our own leadership and tried to whip votes against some of the majority's positions. It's usually there is a ceiling at what they can do. And I do not see her getting more than probably 20 Democrats. Right. And I think that you can have more Republicans than that are willing to support this. And Kim, I'm curious, in your media diet, how much are you seeing conversation about this infrastructure package? If you add this $4 trillion to the $2 trillion that was already spent, you could see $6 trillion in new spending coming out of the federal government, and barely a peep. Is that just my own media diet, or have you seen much conversation about this, both in what you watch and also in your social circle?
Yeah, not much. Nobody seems to really care much about infrastructure, which is why I think your analysis is correct, that this would be the time to sort of force the bill in a way from progressives when it comes to this particular, the reconciliation. Because, look, people aren't paying attention to infrastructure. They don't care about it. It's not the same as like what you were saying with the relief checks where people desperately needed that money. People don't desperately need infrastructure. We've been living with crumbling infrastructure for quite some time. So it's like, what's another little while longer? But people do desperately need things like childcare. They do desperately need things like free college. They desperately need these things. So I do think that now would be the absolute time to try and force that bill through, for sure. But without a lot of media attention, I think in the progressive circles, I don't know how much pressure the squad will have to actually really hold firm on that. You know, it's kind of a good talking point right now. It seems like they're actually trying to do something that's good for the people. But when push comes to shove, are they actually going to really hold the line on that one? That's yet to be seen. Unless other progressive media commentators and, with big viewerships actually do try to get them to force that. Right. Then, as we've seen in the past, that sort of attempt, then, maybe there will be a little bit more to it. But yeah, infrastructure is boring to a lot of people. So
it sure is. And if this were a vote counting fight between Pelosi and AOC, you'd want to bet on Pelosi every time. She's an incredible vote counter. The good news for AOC on this front is that Pelosi has actually insisted on the same thing. Like, she has told Biden, I'm not pushing through this bipartisan package, without the reconciliation package coming right behind it. Alyssa's right, though, that she has these midterm election imperatives that are also driving her. So there's some conflicting incentives there. But Alyssa, we're looking forward to what's on your radar next.